Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, or whatever time zone it is wherever you are in the world. It is your Lord and Saviour, the Law by Night podcast guy. Before we begin this episode of the podcast, I would like to take a few moments of your time to tell you about this episode's sponsor. And this isn't one of those joke sponsors either. This is a 100% genuine sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Angry Hamster Publishing, a Netherlands-based TTRPG company. As of this episode's airing, their latest game, Witches Fated Souls 2nd Edition, is going through their Kickstarter. Witch Fated Souls is a dark, modern fantasy tabletop role-playing game that centers around the fated, men and women who have answered the question above with yes. The fated have sold their soul to a demon and received strange new magical powers in return. Those powers are the key to a world hidden within our own. It has its own rules and is governed by an ancient council. Will your character barter away their soul out of despair or ambition? As a player, you get to choose which kind of demon you have given your soul to, and thus to which fate your character belongs. Each fate has its own unique spells, advantages, and playstyles. Choose wisely. You only have one soul after all. If that sounds like your cup of tea or mug of joe, follow their Twitter and Facebook pages, as well as have a look at their Kickstarter page for more goodies. The links to all of those can be found in the descriptions of this episode. And with that bit of friendly promotion out of the way, let us start the podcast episode proper. Why, hello there. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, or whatever time zone it is wherever you are in the world, and well, it's been quite a while since we've done this, isn't it? In case you don't know, this is Cainite Conversations, where I pluck somebody from the tabletop role-playing game community, and we talk about tabletop role-playing games. Previously, about a year ago, we talked to Sarah Thompson, where we discussed their work regarding disability, diversity with the combat wheelchair, and their various projects with Artel Soaring Games. Before that, we spoke with Chris Sack of the Twin Cities by Night podcast, when they do all sorts of things, Vampire, Chronicles of Darkness, and a bit of Call of Cthulhu as well. But today, we actually have somebody who kind of fits in the gap between those two things, mainly a author of many a tabletop role-playing game, and I'm assuming for Vampire the Masquerade fans and World of Darkness in general, you probably have one of her books. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to a multiple award-winning developer and author, and somebody who, just to toot my toot a little bit, somebody I'm very honoured to have as a good friend of mine, Steffie de Vaan. Hello there and welcome. And how are you this evening?
I am excellent, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very glad to be counted as one of your friends.
Yes, it's you're a very fun and great individual to be around, and hopefully someday we will meet in person, and I'm sure we'll get up to all sorts of mischief.
That would be amazing.
So, I'm going to ask you a question that I can guarantee you've probably been asked many times before. How did you get into tabletop role-playing games, and how did that lead you into writing them?
I looking back, adolescent me wasn't very clever. I wanted to play a card game back then, the X-Files tradable card game. So what I did is I emailed a random dude on the internet who also played the game, and then we met physically. Somehow I did not end up murdered, but instead we became very good friends, and he played RPGs, and he introduced me to, I think it was Dragonlance for first, and then Ravenloft, and then together we emailed other people on the internet who played Vampire, and then we met them, and again did not get murdered. And then after Vampire we played Mage, the Ascension.
Wow, that's kind of weird for me to think about, because it's kind of like a precursor to sort of what a lot of people do these days. Various Discord servers and Facebook groups and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, back then, I'm going to show my age, but you had message boards that you could leave. I don't know, yeah, it's a bit like forums, but yeah, they have message boards, and I don't know if he saw my ad or I saw his. It was also weirdly formulated. I don't know. I'm glad I didn't get murdered. I think one of us was open to extreme possibilities, and we meant that as an X-Files joke. And looking back, I'm like, oh my god, how did you not get solicited?
I mean, there was the expression "great minds think alike."
Yeah, exactly. We both saw that and we're like, extreme possibilities, X-Files.
Well, I for one am very glad that you didn't get murdered for a whole slew of reasons.
Yes, me too.
I bet. So how did that... what made you decide that you're going to take this hobby of yours into a profession?
Well, I've always been a freelance writer. I've done a lot of freelance writing work and editing and things that had nothing to do with the tabletop RPGs. I've edited like medical journals and stuff. And then there was an all call for RPG writers, and I sent my work in, and then two of them contacted me individually saying that they liked my work and if I wanted to be on their project. And it's a pretty small world, so once you're in, you notice that not half, but some of the writers on that project, they are developers in their own right. So then you email them asking if they have more jobs, and then it spirals from there.
How easy was it for you to slip into that role? Like, I'm guessing, asking what's the process involved for somebody wanting to take the plunge, as it were?
I mean, I was lucky. I sent in one submission, and then two developers contacted me and asked if I was available for work. I have also sent submissions to many other companies, some of whom have immediately replied and said, oh, that's great. Some of whom had the decency to come back and say, it looks good, but we don't have any work for you. And some who just crickets, you don't hear anything. But I got lucky that my first submission was a hit with two different people.
I guess you could say that this is an industry that's built around luck.
Well, yeah, and skill. You do have to be
sure,
good,
yeah.
but it's you have to, what you write has to resonate with the person who's reading it. And once you find the people who like what you're reading, there will be people in that same circle who will also like what you're writing.
I mean, somebody who has a background in freelancing as well, I think there's a lot I can hear and see a lot of similarities here, that basically just show your best self wherever you go, and as people tend to move around and they work on different things, they can recommend you and hire you for this, that and the other.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Once people have seen your work and they like it, they will then introduce you to other people. And but I will say that I have been introduced, and sometimes it will lead to new jobs, and other times it's just crickets. So I don't know what the magic formula is. But I've been pretty lucky in that I tend to, well, I'm not lucky. I make my deadlines. I work to spec, which is very important. I stick to my word count, and that goes a very long way in the freelance industry.
Basically following instructions and making sure you uphold to your end of the bargain, so to speak.
Can you write what people have asked you to write? Because it doesn't matter how wonderful it is if they can't use it in their book.
And just for clarification, for anybody who's not familiar with the terminology, is that what you mean when you say when you write to spec?
Yeah, exactly, to specifications. They give you a short outline of what they need you to write, and then you are supposed to write that. Now,
how did all of that lead into the world of darkness and the various themes of vampire, most notably 5th edition, which I'm saying for the benefit of the listeners here, who are probably all coming into vampire playing 5th edition, and your various involvement with the Chronicles of Darkness? I'm assuming from what you've said that it's just from working from these same groups of people that they hired and recommended you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the original company that hired me was Onyx Path, who does the Chronicles of Darkness and the World of Darkness. So that's where I got my first work, and they liked me a lot. So I got more work from them, and I've written for Vampire the Masquerade V20 and V5. I've written for Vampire the Requiem, both Changelings, the blue books from the Chronicles of Darkness, and then from there to the Fall of London, which wasn't with Onyx Path anymore. And then other game lines, like I've written for Call of Cthulhu and Ravenloft, and Witch Fated Souls and Angry Afterlife Wandering Sword, which is an indie award-winning game. Uncaged Goddesses for D&D. But yeah, I started in the Chronicles and the World of Darkness.
So you say that would you say that your main focus would be around the modern horror sort of things? Yes.
I mean, I write other things, but people tend to hire me for modern settings.
Cool. Now, you mentioned one game there, which of course is the main reason why I have dragged you here this evening. Based on the ad reel that you all heard at the beginning, Steffie is one of the authors for Witch Fated Souls, and as I said in the ad reel, the second edition is currently going through its Kickstarter, and I had a look over the quick start for it, and it looks very interesting. And it's like, since reading it and the introduction that you gave me personally, Steffie, I was just hooked straight away. It just sounds like a lot of fun and something that I think I would enjoy playing and waffling about until the end of time. But what is Witch Fated Souls?
So Witch it's an urban horror fantasy game, so it's set in this world. But the deal is you have sold your soul to a demon for reasons wholly of your own. Maybe you needed somebody to get you out of student loans. Maybe you needed somebody to cure a dying family member. Maybe you wanted secret knowledge, but for whatever reason you made a deal with a demon. You sold your soul to them, because honestly, a soul in this economy. The trick is, the moment you do that, immediately, no matter what kind of doubts you had before about what the hell a soul is, the moment it's gone, you sense that it was gone, and you also sense that it was real, and whatever it is, you shouldn't have sold it. You need to get it back. And then the tricky part is that there is a way to get your soul back, but that involves magic, and as it happens, the demon that you bargained with is also the person who is teaching you magic. So now you have to make new bargains with them, hoping to get to the magic that gets you out of this mess that you created, while the demon is of course hoping to run you so far into the ground that you have nothing left to bargain at the end and you're just completely theirs. And then within that trap that you landed yourself in, there's a quite empowering narrative, because you know you can get out of it. Unlike student loans, there's an end to this hell. But also there's a whole society of witches, and they, and especially your coven within that, functions like they're like a found family of sorts. They're messy and dysfunctional, but especially your coven, they will have your back no matter what you do. No matter how badly you screw up, they'll be there. And so there is a sense of empowerment and a sense of finding your community within a huge mess that you landed yourself in.
So basically, any extended family of any description, but without all the demon shit. Hopefully.
Yes.
I just love that all so much, and for the benefit of the listener, I was just sitting here, just listening to that, just with this, I guess, a sinister grin across my face, because as someone who primarily storytells and runs games with people, ooh, the shit I could put people through here.
Yes.
So this is the second edition that's been worked on. Did you have involvement with the first edition?
I did not. That was completely Liz's brainchild. That's Elizabeth Chai Pradikun, who is an amazing, talented author who has worked on Chronicles of Darkness, but also on Hellboy. She is the project manager for the amazingly successful Avatar RPG. And she is the owner of Angry Hamster Publishing, which publishes Witch First Edition. And the first edition was completely her brainchild. And we met fairly early in both our careers. And I think I've been on all of her books since we met, including this one.
That's pretty special.
Yeah, we clicked. It was she was very cunning. She needed help with something, and she saw my last name and she was like, "Oh, that person is Dutch," and Liz is also Dutch. So she emailed me and she was like, "Hey, ik heb hulp nodig." So immediately I was like, "Yes, of course I'll help you. I mean, we're both Dutch. I'll help you out." And then it built from there.
Oh, that's really wholesome. So, for anybody who has played the first edition and is debating about upgrading, as it were, or maybe some people that are just curious, what would you say that the second edition changes and updates or revises or whatever from the first edition, if of course you're allowed to talk about that at the moment?
Yeah, one thing I did is I deliberately teased out the claustrophobia of being trapped in this deal more, because that was one of the tones in the first edition, but it wasn't one of the strongest tones, and I really loved that idea because I often feel trapped. I think a lot of us often feel trapped in some situations, some that we have a hand in and others that are completely out of control, but whether it's bad parents or bad partners or bad jobs or bad loans that you entered into eyes wide open and not fully realizing what the fine print was. But we've all been there. And what I like about Witch is that you can get out of it. That's the whole point, that there is an end game to Witch, which is getting yourself out of this. But in order to make that bit where you get out of it more important, I felt it was also important to highlight the claustrophobia of being trapped. So we teased that out more, the relationship with your demon, which we're using the term demon because that is what the witches call them, but that is also, like, is Cthulhu a demon? Yeah, you might call him that. Is the Archangel Michael a demon? Yeah, you might call him that. It's the term they give to entity that is clearly not human and that deals in souls. Oh, we don't know what the fuck else is going on, so they call it a demon, but it doesn't necessarily mean demon in the cultural sense as you and I would agree to it. But anyway, so we teased out the relationship with the demon more, and we also cut them off from mortal resources by saying that there are hunters. They were also in first edition, but we updated them, brought them into the present because it's been 10 years since the last edition, I think.
It's quite a gap.
And and we said that they are actively creating a second satanic panic and infiltrating law enforcement and governments and hospitals. And it's not that they are everywhere, but as a witch, you will never ever know if this hospital is safe or if it's infiltrated.
Ooh.
Which effectively means you can never go to a hospital, ever. You can never go to the cops. You can never go to your government to further enhance that feeling of claustrophobia, like you're trapped, you can't really turn anywhere.
And a sense of isolation as well.
Yes.
Something that you mentioned when you were giving that description has kind of latched on to me when you said that's demons, because that's what witches would call these entities. And this may seem like a redundant or stupid, perhaps frivolous question, but how much does that actual, I guess, witch culture actually bring into this? Because I'm hazarding to guess that quite a bit of research did go into this rather than just being, oh, witches, they cast magic, demons, magic, if that's making sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of research went into it, and we had a lot of sensitivity consultants. What we did is, demons are names for cultural creatures, but like one of them, if you read it, it's called a devil. Is it a biblical devil? Not quite sure, but it might be. And there are other demons who you go, oh, is that this creature from this mythology? We're not saying that it is, but it could be. It could be that that Christians and witches encountered the same creature and both named it devil because that is the cultural word they had for it. Doesn't mean that the Christians are right on what a devil is. It doesn't mean that the witches are right on what the devil is, but they did both encounter the same part of the elephant, if you're familiar with the metaphor of I think there's 5 people in a dark room and there's an elephant in the room, and each of them, one is feeling a leg and the other is feeling an ear and the other is feeling a trunk, and so they are describing vastly different creatures. One thinks it's a snake and the other thinks it's a fan to fan air into your face, and another thinks it's a tree trunk, because none of them are seeing the whole elephant. They're all describing parts of. So that's a bit what it is like. So we had consultants for that to make sure that where we are adjacent to cultures, we are being respectful. And as for the witchcraft part specifically, so here's the thing. There are religions that use witchcraft, such as Wicca and Brujeria. but witchcraft in itself is a craft.
Hence the name.
Yes, it is something that you do. So what we did do is the ritual aspect and how you make potions. That ties back to how the craft works. But that doesn't have any religious undertones. We are definitely not out there saying that all Wiccans sell their soul to the devil. Because I happen to know a lot, and most of them don't.
Yes, no, I like that as well. It's something that I feel many companies and individuals could improve tenfold on, just having multiple sensitivity readers of various descriptions, because everybody would have their own biases, or they may be lacking information, or this, that, or the other. I also kind of like the way that you're describing things, that it sounds like it's going to be open enough for game masters, as this game calls it, to give their own interpretations, and players to, I guess, find what the relationship between them and their demon is, that they could call how they would view their demon would be different to the next witch, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and there are several types, and some of them are more malevolent than other, like devils relish tormenting their witches. They do actually like that. But then there are also others, the Reynard, who pretend to be your friend and might actually be their witches, believe that they are actually their friends, and the witches know them best, so presumably they might be right. But these are friendly spirits. And then there are also ones that are just alien to human life. We have the Praetor, which Liz and I both love the Praetor, but they are demons who think that decay is beautiful. So they are trying to help you by proposing that you take off your skin and let it rot. Huh. Or that you should possibly, introduce maggots to your eyeball, because you would be better for that. It would be more beautiful. Meanwhile, you're over here as a human going, yeah, okay, so people don't like that. Something you need to learn about humans. We don't like maggots in our eyeballs.
No, I mean, in some weird, convoluted sense, you could argue that.
Yes. Well, the Praetor is like, no, but it would be so much. Imagine how happy you would be with a friend in your eyeball. So
as expected, there isn't like any breed, I guess, type or whatever you would wish to call it, demon that's totally 120% A-OK being your friend and everything's all hunky happy dory.
The Reynard say that they are your friend. They would also like you to join them in the spirit world. And we deliberately, the witches who work with them, the Sochet, do believe that. We are deliberately leaving it up in the open that the Sochet might be right. It is their culture, it is their demon, so they are the closest to it. But if you as a GM want to say, no, they are tricking you, they are hoping that you'll join them, and then the trap is sprung, that is also entirely possible. We do tend to default to what the people inside the culture say is right. So unless you as a GM want to house rule that, the Sochet are right that the Reynard are friendly.
So this is more or less a game that has a strong emphasis on narrative and decision making rather than something that's, I guess, combat heavy.
It's typically not combat heavy. Most of Angry Hamster games are not. There is conflict, but we actually have mechanics that allow you to resolve conflict bodily, physically, or mentally or emotionally. And typically how the game would go is that you as a GM decide that something is a level 2 challenge, and then your players come up with how they want to. So say there is a vampire guarding a gate to a cemetery and you want to get into the cemetery. So, and the vampire is challenge 3. And you could try to run past it. That would be a physical test. You could try to talk to the vampire and fast talk them into letting you in, thinking that you're their friend or you'll do them a favor. Or possibly you could trick it by some diversion and then sneak past, and that would be respectively a physical or a social or a mental challenge. And all of those are difficulty 3. And it's up to your players to decide which path they want to take.
I like the freedom that presents, and also vampires, as you've already signed me up, you're signing me up again. So how would these sort of conflicts work? So let's just say, because I'm going to be that player for a second, I would be the one that would try and charm the vampire, be that person that wants to try and elope with the vampire, as it were. You can be the game master here. So how would those sorts of conflicts be handed out? Is it a contested role, or is it similar to the Power of the Apocalypse system, where there's one dice and then there's a difficulty that needs to be met? How does that work here?
First of all, the GM never rolls. The GM presents the difficulties and the challenges, and then the players solve them, and then the players are the ones who roll the dice. So the GM never touches dice. You have several stats, body, mind, and soul, and then under those you have skills, like body has maneuver, going around something, and overcome, which is going through something, and withstand, which is taking the damage. So you would pair one of your core stats with the accompanying skill. So if you were trying to charm them, that is probably soul, because soul is your social stat. It's combined with charm, and then you would simply try to. There's also create, but that would be making something beautiful for them to win them over. But if it's just you talking to them, that would be charm, and you would talk your way past. And if that doesn't work, some of the witch fates have magic that make you more persuasive and more appealing to others.
I really like the simplicity of that, because I think one of the things that turns me off from some systems is that there's either too many dice or there's too much thinking or maths involved, but that just seems pretty straightforward to me. So what dice do players use for this?
D6s. We're doing, for the Kickstarter, we're making custom D6s, but you roll D6s for everything. You just, if your body is 2 and your withstand is 2 and you're combining the 2, you roll 4 dice. So it's the point is that it's supposed to be intuitive and easy, and it's supposed to give the players a lot of choice. I mean, you could absolutely, if you wanted to, you could punch your way through everything, but we have typically found that the people who play our games prefer to not do that.
And it does sound that this is the sort of thing where that's not where rituals or magic or whatever, or any means of violence seems like a last resort sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We're supposed to, I mean, yeah, you're about the saying that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. We are trying to give you a lot of tools in your toolbox and not just hammers. And typically our players tend to be the reasonable sort who are like, yeah, but the vampire lives in this cemetery. It's his home. You can't just go into somebody's home and then beat them up.
I mean, there's some individuals in this world who think that's a totally okay thing to do, but anywho.
Yes.
So you mentioned vampires, and I jokingly, he does in quotation marks, said that I've signed up for a second time. What other weird and wonderful things can players expect to find, or game masters yeet their way at players?
Well, we have changelings, of course, because I definitely wanted those in there. We have various were creatures. There are the dead. Funnily enough, the vampires, for example, there's a whole realm of the dead where ghosts live and haunts and echoes and Arawan, which are the rulers of the underworld. And Arawan are not necessarily dead themselves, but they are so powerful that they can shape the world around them. So the underworld where they live is basically their mindscape. And vampires are very proud creatures, and they don't want to live in somebody else's mindscape, so they kind of immigrated wholesale to Earth, where they are big fish in a smaller pond, but at least they're big fish.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yes. But yeah, we made sure that the supernatural world has its own rhythm and its own creation, and everything that is in there is specifically something that you would encounter as witches, because there are two aspects. The first is that witches tend to go where other witches are. Much like any person seeking community, you will go where people like you are. And because of that, while the amount of witches worldwide is very small, they tend to congregate in certain places, typically big cities. So the creatures they encounter are also creatures that you will find in cities, like ghosts, who obviously, if you've got a big city of 1 million people, you will have more ghosts than, in a rural country where 2 people live. So you'll find ghosts, and then there are some witch legacy creatures, like once upon a time the various realms were very close together, and the witches traveled to all of these different realms, and then at some point not all of them were lost, like Avalon was lost. But because witches tend to dabble in alchemy and work with elements, the pathway to the alchemical realm has remained open simply because they travel there so often. So a lot of other realms were lost, but they can still go to the alchemical realm where creatures of fire and wind and water live.
Wow. I'm loving the constant stacking of layers. It sounds that there's quite, someone who's not familiar with the first one, it sounds that there's quite the extensive lore building all of this together.
It is, but we did make sure that it makes sense, and you can play witch in one single city and keep it there, or you can pull in all these different realms, and it's whatever the group prefers.
Oh, for sure. It's just there's just again just storyteller head and created. I am just thinking of different things that I could pull in, flavorly so, almost like alchemy, trying to make sure that I'm not overdoing this potion, so to speak. So how is alchemy defined here? Because across various different medias, alchemy is defined in various different things.
So alchemy is what we did with the alchemical realm is that it is in essence a realm of pure elements, but it is shaped by how humans perceive elements. So you have creatures representing the 4 classical Greek elements that we all know, which is water, earth, fire, wind, and ether. But for example, Islamic alchemists used other elements, and they are also represented there. And then we have modern alchemists like John Dee, who used sulfur, mercury, salt, I think it is. And then, of course, you come to, is radium an element? Is vibranium an element? If enough people go into that realm expecting to see radium, eventually elements will shape itself. So it's the most fantastical of the realms. The others are much more like Earth. This is the one where we delved into the fantasy aspect of the game, in saying that human culture shaped the elements into sentient beings. And there's a lot of human culture, which means there are, uncountable creatures there.
It's all very varied and, as you said, very fantastical, and just it all just sounds very interesting. And again, just tastefully introducing the different cultures, just so anybody can feel at home being, I guess, dictated and mucked about with a demon.
Yes, I mean that was the idea. Yes, to say that, because the book also assumes that all mortal religions are right in a way. We don't want to go in and say that Christians are right or wrong, or Muslims are right or wrong, or Wiccans are right or wrong. We're just assuming that all of them are right. They may not all see the same part of the truth, but what they do see, that exists. So, and if you as a GM are like, oh wonderful, I know a lot about Christianity, so I'm going to definitely say that demons are fallen angels from heaven after the war, then you should do that. And if you're like, no, that is not something I'm comfortable with, then you should not do that. But we are completely leaving that open. We are saying that religions do exist in the game world, as do witches, as in witches who practice witchcraft, which is not the same as the fated witches that we have. And all of them are right. And if you want to use that in your game or not, then that is completely up to you.
Again, I'm just loving everything that I'm hearing. It's just open, that each person's own truth is their truth, I guess, as far as it's concerned. Again, it's just something that's very exciting to hear and see, and I really hope that more players will latch on to this, and the second edition will blossom far more than the first one. which I'm sure did very well. Again, I don't know. I wasn't aware until a certain somebody brought it to my attention.
I will say that the first edition is pretty awesome. I don't know if there was a sale going on. I don't know if there still is for the people who want to get the first book as comparison, or for the art, which is lovely. But it's still there. It's amazing. We definitely use a lot of it. We just shifted the focus a bit on the claustrophobia, but as you can see, for example, in the alchemical realm, there is still that sense of, if you want to escape your demon problems by traveling into a fantasy realm, you can do. Eventually you're going to have to go back, because there's still that bit where you need to get your soul back. But if you need a vacation, go ahead.
So that means that, does this apply to only this alchemy realm, or is it to the other realms that the fated can travel to where your demon doesn't accompany you?
I mean, the alchemical realm is the most fantastical one, because it's shaped by human culture and thought and perception, which means anything goes. And the realm of the dead is more everything that died here stays there. So if you travel into Rome, into the otherworld, it might be Rome as you see it now, but just slightly darker because there is no sun. Or it could be Rome, like of the Caesars. Both are possible. And I think Rome is not one of the cities that we have written for the core book, so that is completely, because we are writing some cities, but I don't think Rome is one of them, which means you could make up whatever.
Awesome sauce, as they say, technical jargon. So how does the demon play mechanically? Is it, I don't want to make two comparisons to other things because it's not always the best thing to do, but how would the demon play into this mechanically? Is it something akin to Wraith the Oblivion, where somebody else takes on the role of the demon? Is it something that's dictated by the GM, or is it, I guess, decided by dice rolls from the player?
It's typically the GM who plays it. I could also see it being other players at the table, but to be honest, the relationship can get quite antagonistic, so I would also imagine that some players aren't comfortable playing that for each other. So typically it's the GM, but it should never be the GM dictating something. It's more a yes and situation where the buy-in is that your praetor is going to ask you to replace all of your fingers so that you'll be prettier with zombie fingers. And your devil is going to make sure you never sleep at night because it likes the effect that has on your brain. Or the Reynard is going to insist that you go out to amazing parties with it because it's your friend. So that is the buy-in, and then it's a yes and between the player and the GM.
I'm a little concerned just how spontaneous these really screwed up examples are.
I mean, we've been on a Hellraiser binge, so that's my defense.
Sure. Rituals is something that you've mentioned a while ago. Now, is this separate to the magic in the game? Was that its own thing, or they?
It's there are 3 types of magic. Liz wrote them. You have spells. Each fate, there are 6 fates, and each has 2 spell categories, 1 set of rituals and 1 set of potions, and then there's cantrips who anyone can cast. Liz wrote all of them, and I think last count there were like 200 total things distributed over all the fates that you can do, so that's a lot. But yeah, the spells are things that you can do on the fly, and rituals are things that require you to sit down.
Makes
and
sense.
Meet certain parameters.
Such as, if I may pry.
There's one demon that insists on cleanliness, so you summon it while you are taking a bath. It doesn't come if you're not taking a bath. Then there's your devil, who you can summon whenever, but the catch is that you can't make it leave. It leaves when it wants to. And then there's you might have to have certain drinks or food items on hand, or toenail clippings, or baby teeth, or hair, or pets. But there might be things that you need. We do specify that you could, if the player wants to, you should definitely say that yes, all of these can be made vegan if that's your comfort level. If that's the player's comfort level, it's fine if the character is like, I don't want to do this, And the demon is like, yeah, you have to. But it's not okay if the player doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that actually, particularly baby teeth. I mean, it's mine, with me, that would be, I guess, A-okay, because, that's just my thing, but I can imagine a lot of people would find that particular example uncomfortable.
I mean, I would loophole it. Babies lose their teeth. Nobody said you had to get them out of a baby's mouth.
That is very true, and that I guess we're now equal about our messed up minds.
Yes, exactly. Yes, loophole that shit.
But I guess whilst we're on that topic, how is it that the book addresses, like, I guess, consenting gaming and the sessions here and all the safety lines and veils?
We have our own system. It's called the Witch's Marks. It is hand gestures that you make combined with certain things that you say to signal to the group that you are uncomfortable but okay. You need the scene to wrap, or to signal to the group that we need to stop immediately. But Liz wrote those, and she wrote them specifically to match with the tone of the game, so that you're encouraged within the game to use them, if that makes sense. Like we sometimes people feel like they can't break it, they shouldn't. Sometimes people feel like they shouldn't break immersion, which is silly. If you're not feeling comfortable, then yes, break immersion. But the marks are specifically designed so that you can stay within the tone of the game and indicate at the same time that you need people to tone down or to wrap up a scene. And depending on what signal you give, people shouldn't stop giving details and just assume that it happened and we move on. Or the GM might stop the game entirely and be like, okay, do we need to talk about this? Do you need a breather? Do you need a cup of tea? And maybe then you move on, or maybe you postpone until your next game night, depending on what happened. We take safety very seriously, because the relationship with your demon, most demons apart from the Reynard, who are your best friend in the world, but most of them are pretty toxic. Even the Praetor who don't want to be toxic, it's like having a relationship with a Cenobite, to go back to Hellraiser. It's like, yeah, but I don't like my skin being peeled off. I get that you think it's self-care, but it's not. So that relationship is pretty toxic, and that's at the core of the game. So it's very important to have safety rules so that the player can always go like, yeah, no, we're not doing this.
I like that a lot. The immersion breaking thing, I can sort of understand. I mean, someone who's existed and gone around various online spaces, I see far too often actually just people who would rather go through an unpleasant game because their need to game overrides their mental health. So I kind of like the idea that these sorts of gestures are kind of like interwoven into that. So it's I kind of like a breaking the fourth wall charm, I guess.
Yeah, a bit like She-Hulk going, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, it's just, and again, just back to the inclusivity thing for a moment, and with this, it's just it's very comforting to see that, trying to make the space inviting for everybody is a core mechanic of the game. That something that I feel some people tend to miss out on or ignore or whatever is that horror in any medium doesn't really work without consent. Like if you're watching a film, you choose when to end it. Like you choose what sort of bands of horror that you're into. If you're reading a book or playing a game, you choose when you've had enough, or you walk out or whatever. And just, hearing and reading various stories that people just don't care, or it's just a game. It's just super comforting to see that where a game is, where themes of claustrophobia and toxicity are part of the core game, that it shouldn't override the player's well-being and the game master as well, because there's some really twisted players out there who could easily put the games master on the spot, as it were.
No, exactly. Liz and I strongly believe that horror without consent is just trauma.
Yes.
Nobody likes that.
No.
We got enough. We all live on planet Earth. We don't need trauma in our games. So we're very strong on consent, and and as a player you can choose, of course, your demon, because some are worse than others. So that's a first selecting mechanism that you can have, where you go, okay, I'll just go hardcore, I want the devil. Or you can be like, yeah, I want the Reynard, thank you. I want the one who wants to go out and party at the club with me. So that's your first selection mechanics. And then, of course, you should talk about what people want and don't want, like baby teeth off the table. Fine, we won't do that. Or cool. During the mechanics, there were several places where I go, yeah, but this is emotional coercion, and I don't like that. That's one of my things that makes me go, yeah, we're not doing that. And then Liz was like, okay, I'll rewrite that. So you should have like your first session 0, but then after that is all done, you have your witches marks to indicate when you need people to stop or tone down.
And of course, from session to sessions, what might be okay one day isn't okay for another day, and that again is totally fine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I have that in my own life with horror. There are definitely things that I can, for example, The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix series is one of my favorite series, but I can only watch it if my headspace is right. I can't watch it, despite the fact that I really love it. I think it's one of the best horrors ever. But I can only watch it if I'm in a certain headspace, and otherwise I can't. To
me, that makes absolute sense. One more question before we sign off now and get back to our own individual crafting, as it were. I could have made that a bit smoother. Toxicity and claustrophobia are two the themes that we've discussed with this game. Are there any others themes that could entice people in?
I mean, anyone who knows me, and Liz did dial me back a bit, but who knows me knows that I am. I have anarchist leanings. I am anti-fascist. She did not dial me back on the anti-fascism. I'm also very anti-capitalist. And Liz, did she dial me down? No, but she was like, Steffi, that needs to be relevant to the game. And I was like, okay, so Demon Dead is like student loans. Okay, well, if you can make that analogy, then that works. And I was like, okay, so fairies are like the opioid crisis. And she was like, yeah, that makes no sense. But yeah, you will. It's a game about witches and their demons and the wonderful and horrible adventures they go on in an effort to get free. But if you're like, oh, I think this writer hates Nazis and she doesn't think very highly of billionaires, and she also doesn't like the fact that we keep burning the planet, then yes, you would be right.
I was laughing everyone because, yeah, I know you well enough to know that all those themes, even before asking, were going to be in that book, either subtly or very loud and pronounced. And I love the fact that you can do both splendidly. Yes,
I get hired for that. People will be like, oh, you hired me for the anarchist section. And yes, Steffi, because we know you.
I believe, just going to Vampire ever so quickly, I believe with the revision/rewrite of the V5 Anarch book, like anything that's a bloodline specific reference or where it's anarchy at its most forefront was something that was done by you.
Yes, well, they allowed me to do a damsel piece, which is Damsel is one of my favorite characters. I love her so much. But yeah,
I
so
wonder
there's a
why.
damsel piece in there. Exactly, I wonder why. That's my piece. They allowed me to do that. So that is the signature of me that you will often find.
Awesome, and so many people the world over love that. Right, there's lots I could potentially ask, but alas, we both have different things to be getting on with, and time is unfortunately not on our side, so perhaps maybe someday, probably after the release, we can talk about it a bit more. But until then, would you mind just telling the dear listeners where people can find you if they want to keep, to hear the different things you're getting up to, well, see the different things you're getting up to, and more anarchy?
Yep. So Angry Hamster Publishing is on Twitter and Facebook under that name. Angry Hamster Publishing, can't miss it. Although there are 2 Facebook groups, just sign up for both. One is, it's a long story. One is the new one is the old one. Just sign up for both. We won't spam you, I promise. And then I am on Twitter as 100 Things I Love. That is 100 the number, Things I Love. And you'll find me there. You follow me. Tweet at me. I'm always happy to be tweeted at.
Oh, and use that sparingly, obviously. don't take the piss is basically what I'm saying. And
I mean, I will block people. I'm very liberal with my block button if you do turn out to be a billionaire fan. Don't do that. All billionaires are evil, even the one that you like so much. Especially that one.
Indeed. So, yeah, you've been warned. Although the chances of them finding this podcast, I think, would be very unlikely. But
I don't think your audience loves billionaires either.
No, but I just want to cover all ground, just to make sure, just stamp out all the weeds. Like, you just let one and they just explode everywhere.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And of course, I am the Law by Night podcast guy. As per usual, you can find me at Law by Night VTM on Twitter and the same place on Instagram, but it's got underscores instead of spaces. You can find all those delightful links in the description of the YouTube upload, and I'll probably put in hyperlinks into the podcast versions. And until next time, farewell.